Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Newsmakers. This is the beginning of our spring 2010 series, and we're glad you all came out at our new location, the Sweet Auburn Bistro. So without further ado, Ms. Tara Clay.
Our special guest of honor is here this evening, City Council President Ceasar Mitchell. Ceasar, thank you very much. We're glad to have you this evening.
Well, it's good to be here.
I know you have a full schedule,
Yes.
so we're glad you could fit us in at the last minute. Now, the last time we were supposed to have you here was almost a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, and you were not running for City Council President. You were running for Mayor of Atlanta, and then we had a few changes, and a few people slid from one space to another.
Yeah, there was a little political maneuvering going on.
Okay, but it worked out for you.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work out that way.
Being from this city, I have a deep and abiding love for my town, and so I did for a while consider running for mayor. But at the end, I realized that City Council President was really where I thought I could provide the best leadership for the next 4 years.
And now, a lot of people don't know this, but as City Council President, one of your roles is to slide into the mayor's position if for some reason he or she can't fulfill that job. There's something in the language about that. So
True.
Does that mean if he goes on vacation, or does he have to get sick or go missing? How does that work?
Well, it's pretty simple. I serve as mayor in the event of the unavailability, incapacitation, or death of the mayor. So it could be anything ranging from the mayor being out of the country and unable to execute documents on behalf of the city because of being out of town, or the mayor passing away. And so in those instances and everything in between, I would have to serve as mayor.
Okay, so we still may be able to say Mayor Ceasar Mitchell.
Well, let's hope not in that sense, of course.
Well, yes, we absolutely don't want anything bad to happen to our current mayor.
No, we don't.
Mayor Hakeem Reed. You are somewhat around the same age, is that correct?
Yes,
We're in the fabulous 40s.
A year apart, yeah.
And, I just told myself. We're in the fabulous 40s, and it's a fun time, but it's not a time when people expect a mayor to be early 40s or a city council president. Some people think you might be too young or might not have enough experience. What's your response to that? And then what are you doing to, there's something to say for, the elders
Certainly.
in the House. And right now it doesn't look like we have very many of them.
Well, I think that's, to take the short view that the mayor's office or the city council president's role is a role that is traditionally held by folks who are a little more seasoned in age, I might say. Really, I think is not what we should do. If you take the long view and you look back over Atlanta's history, many of Atlanta's mayors have been young, men and women. If you look at Maynard Jackson, when he served as mayor, he was 33 years old, 34 at the max. You had, of course, Mayor Campbell. He was in his late 30s, early 40s. If you look around the country, in cities like Newark, Washington, D.C., and other places, you'll see that you have young leadership in municipal government. So if you look more broadly, and if you take the long historical view, what you see happening here in Atlanta right now is really no different from the past, and no different from what you see happening in other major cities in the country. So, with that being said, beyond kind of this notion of what history might indicate, I think we have a city council president, and a mayor who all come to the table with significant experience, not just 1 or 2 years as elected officials or no prior elected experience, but serious experience. I've been an elected official for 8 years. This is my 9th year. Most of the members of the city council have been around for at least 2 terms, if not 3. And the mayor, of course, has been in office for at least 12 to 13 years. So we're not neophytes in elected office.
Obviously, we know that, but we just wanted to talk about that because there are some people who think that it's a challenge. So we definitely want to make it clear that you are not neophytes.
In these roles, you have to work hard. And if the role is part-time, as is mine, you have to work hard at two roles, at your full-time job, which I do as a lawyer, as well as city council president. And they both are full-time jobs. Only one is characterized as a part-time job. But that's the real kind of issue there, I think.
The biggest issue is what are you going to do? What have you done and what are you going to do? The city, we have so many issues. We have a budget problem. We have crime, housing, the jail. There are a lot of issues that are important to different people. For me, I think the budget is probably one of the biggest because it impacts so many areas. As city council president and as someone who's been on city council for 8 years, what are the priorities in 2010? Atlanta needs help. What are you doing?
Well, the first thing you have to do really is make smart decisions and try to make every decision you make smart and incrementally sound. In other words, as we move forward with this new term as city council president, the first round of decisions I had to make was to identify the chairman or the chairs or of all the committees. So I had to essentially identify the council members.
And how do you do that? What is the process? You have some new council members too.
We do. We have 5 new council members. And what I tell anybody is that our 5 new council members come with a breadth and depth of experience. They don't come as neophytes in life, neophytes in public service, or neophytes even in their professional background. And so my task, one of my first tasks as city council president was to identify the council members who would lead the committees, as well as identify and establish the chemistry of the council through how I appointed council members to committees, whether it's the finance committee, which is widely viewed as the most important committee because that's where the money is discussed most often, or whether it's the public safety committee.
And what's happening with the money? Speaking of money, finance and the budget.
I guess, having been, on council 8 years, I've seen a couple of cycles. When we came on council back in 2001, 2002, we were coming out of a recession. We entered into a recession over the last couple of years, of my second term. During my first 3 years, we had to make very tough decisions regarding our water and sewer infrastructure. So from my perspective, I won't call this a walk in the park, but I will say that I think we've got all the tools necessary in terms of this council and the mayor to make good and sound decisions. Now, what does that mean? That means going back to the fundamentals of what government is designed and intended to do. If you look at our city charter, it says we have to provide first for public safety, health, and welfare of the citizenry. That means making a strong dedication and commitment to police and fire. It also means making sure that we clean our streets, that we provide sanitation services, that we provide clean water and adequate sewer systems. If we focus in on those fundamentals as our priorities and then line up our dollars as we have them with those priorities, I think we can start to incrementally make some progress. But again, I think it's just going to take a process. City government is not unlike the greater society in terms of how this recession has impacted us.
And how much control does city council have over where the money comes from?
Well, where the money comes from really is a very simple equation. It comes from taxes and fees and to a smaller or lesser degree grant dollars from other levels of government or other organizations that have decided to invest in the city. Our taxes come, of course, from property taxes and from sales tax that we get. We get a share of sales tax. Fees come from fees that people pay to get certain services delivered to them by city government, such as their water service. That's a fee that you actually pay. And when we look at projects that are of significance, say, for example, with green space, there are organizations out there, even the Beltline, for example, that will provide grants and other types of financial support to the city to help us further those projects, as well as the federal government with some of their grants as well as the state government. So the source of revenue really is pretty much fixed. However, we will have to in the years to come, and I hope to be a part of a process and even provide leadership in terms of bringing folks together to figure out how we might expand our revenue base. That's going to be critical. But right now we have to control our costs. And that's what we'll be really focused on as we look at this next budget.
And does controlling costs equate to people losing jobs?
When you talk about controlling costs, you have to look at everything across the board. And I really do believe that there's always this fear on the part of elected officials to discuss tough issues. But one thing I've found in my 8 years is when you are upfront with the citizens, when you educate citizens about how city government works, how we deliver services, the priority of services, and having tough conversations really becomes a whole lot easier when you've done that and laid that groundwork up front. Now, what does that mean with the budget? Controlling costs could mean anything from deciding not to deliver a particular service or cutting back the volume of a particular service to actually, how might I put it, to actually laying off employees or not continuing certain contracts. We will have a number of decisions to make in this budget, which could or may not include riffing employees, a reduction in force. One of the things that was put out very early by the mayor as well as by a couple of members of council was that we weren't going to pursue a tax increase. So when you don't pursue a tax increase, your only measure to address shortfalls would really be to reduce costs. And that's kind of the box we're in right now.
So are you waiting, you have to wait for the mayor to present his budget before you can act? Is there a communication between city council and the mayor? Do you make suggestions? Do you work with the mayor or do you wait for his directive?
Well, here's typically how the budget process works on an annual basis. We're on a fiscal year, which means our fiscal year goes from July 1 until June 30th. What the administration has been doing over the last several months is pulling together their budget for the 2011 fiscal year. I've taken it upon myself to have conversations with the mayor about what I think are some budget sticking points that the council will have. And the mayor has been very gracious in taking time to sit down in advance with the council and discuss some of our budget concerns. So we've had a couple of meetings to discuss the budget in advance. Next week, the council will have a half-day budget retreat where we'll have an opportunity to get some feedback from the CFO about the budget that he will be presenting to us the following week. Once that budget is given to the council, it goes into the finance committee and it sits there and it's held so that we have an opportunity to get presentations from the various departments, from the various employees, stakeholder groups, as well as from citizens. And as we go through that process over the next couple of months, we may amend the budget to add certain expenditures. We may amend the budget to cut out certain expenditures. We may look at ways to identify some additional small buckets of revenue, but it'll be a process. There will be debate amongst council members and debate between the administration and the council.
How do the citizens get involved in this process?
Well, we have a process that allows for citizens to, what we've done in the past is to have what we call budget hearings where the citizens can come down and comment on the budget. We really kind of leave it up. Traditionally we've left it to the chairperson of the finance committee to decide how to engage the public in conversations about the budget. We've done something as broad. We've done something as broad as actually have several hearings out in the neighborhood to just having a series of public hearings down at City Hall. So what we'll do this year will depend upon kind of the appetite of the council.
Okay, so let's move to something a little lighter.
Yeah, that's kind of heavy. Jump right in, that's heavy.
Let's talk about what your pet projects are. What does the city council president are you working on now, or what do you want to see happen over the next year?
Well, I think you touched on one of the things. One of the things that that I will spend some considerable energy working on will be identifying ways to grow the city. And that will range from conversations about even our bar hours, believe it or not, becomes potentially a revenue source, to attracting new business in the city to create new opportunities for corporate tax. So we've got to really have a conversation about how we might actually generate new revenues. That's something that's really big on my list. But also, I'm going to continue some of the things I did as an at-large council member. For example, this weekend, as I see some young people that are here, I'll have my 9th semi-annual college prep series, which is an opportunity for young people and their parents to have exposure to the SAT and the PSAT and the ACT exam for free, and also to experience a college fair. So that's something I'll continue to work on. But my mantra has always been creating a city that is clean, green, safe, and thriving. And so you'll see me do some work in the area of sustainability, helping to advance the city's efforts around ensuring that we create a sustainable environment in the area of air quality, water quality, and other things in green space.
Speaking of green space, that is the big thing now. There are a lot of business owners here with us today and who watch Newsmakers Live who want to know what the city is looking for. Is there anything you can tell them about working with the city in terms of maybe a green business or what the city is looking for?
Well, the best thing I can do is to recommend that you reach out to our Atlanta Development Authority and our planning department. Literally just today, I was on a panel with ICSC, which is the organization of retail owners, retail shopping center owners. And on that panel with me were both James Shelby, who's the Commissioner of Planning, and Tyrone Rochelle, who is over tax allocation district and other types of funding opportunities at the Atlanta Development Authority. And what I always recommend to business owners is to learn and figure out what the city's menu of financial or economic support is. And that menu can be found at the Atlanta Development Authority as well as in the planning department. So I think we've got some opportunities, and the green building issues is something that I think will evolve over time. We don't have any specific, on the city level, specific economic development incentives, but we are aware of some of the incentives that are provided on the state level for green building and sustainable building and sustainable or green building opportunities. But there's a lot going on.
Okay, I want to hop.
What happened? What happened?
I want to hop back to the education piece for just a moment. You mentioned your program that brings students in for the SAT, to study for the SAT and prepare for college. But in Atlanta and throughout the state, we have huge issues with kids in middle school and high school. What's happening with the city from that level? We're looking at other counties and other cities across the state who are closing schools because of going back to the budget. Is that something that's likely to happen in Atlanta?
Just as a point of fact, the city of Atlanta, city government, and the school system are two separate entities. Our school system is an independent system, so they have their own governing body, which is the school board, and they make their own decisions. They have their own tax source that they receive from taxpayers. But with that being said, I have to applaud, and I was thinking about this the other day, I have to applaud the Atlanta public school system. I know there's a lot of question out there around the CRCT testing and all that, and that starts actually next Tuesday in the city of Atlanta. But when I look at other school systems around the metro area and around the country that really are struggling, I mean, in the city of Detroit, they are closing down 70 plus schools. It's amazing what they're having to do. DeKalb County is struggling with this issue, and other counties around the state of Georgia. When I think back on what the Atlanta public school system has done, I really do applaud them because they actually started their process not just 2 years ago, but they really started their Build Smart program 15 years ago. So they started back in the mid-90s to take a look at what their school facilities needs were going to be over the next 20 years, and they started moving on it immediately. So I give them credit. So you don't hear a lot of conversation coming out of the Atlanta public school system regarding school closures and the like, and they have access to revenue. They, for all that is said otherwise, they've managed their money well, and they've done some good long-term strategic planning. I have to take my hat off to my colleagues at the school board, as well as to Dr. Hall and the administrators in the APS system. Now, beyond that, when we talk about educating our young people really starts at home. And what happens at home to some degree is influenced by what happens on the streets right outside of someone's home and in the community. So what we have to do on the city side, because we do have an impact on education, even though we don't have a technical involvement in the governing of the school board or the school system, we have to make sure that our communities are places where people can live, work, and play safely. We've got to make sure that we utilize opportunities to partner with the school system, with our recreation centers and our green space to utilize those assets in the way that they serve our young people. As council president, one of the things I'm going to do, and I've gotten a commitment from the president of the school system, the school board, is that we're going to meet. The city council and the school board will get together on a regular basis and not just talk. We're going to come up with programs, and we're going to look at opportunities to work together and break ourselves down into working groups to get some specific things done.
Is there a target date for that to begin?
No, there's no target date. We will probably have our first meeting in all candor after we get through this budget process in June.
Before I open it up for more from the audience, I have a sensitive microphone. Before I open it up to questions from the audience, I want to ask you a couple of questions that I did hear, very quick, maybe, regarding the Sears building. Any news, any plans, anything you can share with us on what the city has planned?
Not really much. I mean, as you know, how many of you all know about the Sears, the old Sears building, City Hall East? I see you. Yeah, I see you. But the City Hall East building has been home to some departments, including Camille Love's bureau for many, many years, the Bureau of Cultural Affairs. The city council and the mayor, the past mayor, made a decision 4 years ago at least to get rid of that building. We felt like it was something that should no longer be in our portfolio. It was difficult to manage, it was old, and so we entered into a contract with a developer to sell that building. Well, that was 3 years ago. The transaction has not occurred. There is a new party that stepped into the fray and wants to buy the building. We will be trying to finalize that deal hopefully over the next couple of months. But I can't say now that it will happen or it won't happen. We hope that it will happen, and we hope that it will happen on terms that are acceptable to the taxpayer.
Okay. Before we end, I don't see anyone lined up. Is there anyone that has a question for the President of City Council, Ceasar Mitchell? We do have one question. I'm going to go to the audience. I can get
I just have a question. I'm Richard Shabazz with RSB Report. Do you have any idea as to what are some of the plans for the rec centers to open them back up?
Well, the mayor has announced a plan to partner really with the private sector to reopen all the rec centers. It will take some city resources as well. But his vision, and I really like the vision, is to create what what he calls centers of hope. And this will essentially create an environment where our young people in the city can have what I would call a seamless, all-day experience, learning experience. So that when they go to school in the morning at 8 o'clock and leave at 3 o'clock, they don't go home. They will go to a recreation center and have some culturally or educationally enriching experience. So I'm supportive of that. It's going to take some support from the private sector, and so we're on the council side waiting to see what that looks like, and hopefully we'll be able to support it.
All right, Caesar, we have another question for you.
Hi, my name is Henrietta Turnquest, and I'm an attorney here in...
I know who you are.
My concern over the years has been the fact that the city and other governmental entities will often issue bonds in order to get financing for various projects.
Yes.
And it has been a real disappointment, should I say, when you look at who has to do that work, and there are very few black people involved in it. And is there a movement, or what do we have to do in order to get more black people involved in that very lucrative business?
Well, I think if you look at, and that's a very good question. Your question essentially, Attorney Turnquest's question is, what are we going to do as we issue bonds for projects? What are we going to do to get more minorities involved, black people involved in these opportunities? Well, when you look at a bond issuance, it really starts with the actual transaction itself. So there's a whole push and a need to have some level of diversity and inclusion at the transaction level. And then beyond that, you actually have the program level where you actually are doing the work that the bond proceeds are intended to pay for. The city has an EBO program, a program that is designed to provide opportunities for minorities and for women. What has happened really over the last 15 years, and you are more aware of it than I am, of course, given your experience both as a lawyer and as a legislator, what's happened over the last 15 to 20 years is you've had attack after attack after attack on these programs. And so it's made it more difficult for us to provide a broad base of opportunities for the minority community. However, there are ways you can still do it. If you look at this most recent bond issuance that we are doing for the airport, $1.2 billion. With the minority participation in that bond issuance is right at 44%. So you have, up to 44% of those proceeds. That is almost $500 million, a little more than $500 million that will be managed by minority firms. And so that's only one part. Well, no, I heard your question. You said, well, that's just one piece, the investment banking piece. But we also have minority participation in the attorney piece. And of course, when you talk about issuing bonds, that's a particular expertise, but it's not an expertise that is completely unknown to black attorneys. And so I think if you look there, you'll still see there's significant minority participation there as well. But it's something we have to stay very vigilant about, because if we don't, the tendency would be towards 5–10% participation.
I can come talk with you about that.
You certainly can.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President.
How you doing, Ms. Dawes?
This. I heard you mention the Committee for Public Safety, and also one of the issue areas that you were working on possibly as an increased revenue source around the hours for the bars and nightclubs. And I've heard the mayor mention possible special districts. So is that moving further? Is that the area in which we might see increased revenue flow?
We could. I mean, we really could. You have the state of Georgia has to create what's called an entertainment district. And when the state of Georgia creates an entertainment district, we have the ability to have different laws with respect to hours of operation in those districts than we would outside those districts. So that'll create a tremendous opportunity. We're going to see some discussion on it. There's also a lot of conversation. In fact, Tyrone, Rochelle, Commissioner Shelby, and myself, we were all three lambasted today about the whole issue of how we handle entertainment hours and the license review board and all that stuff. So I need to chat with you about that. I really do. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have two more questions for you.
Yes, Honorable President. I think about the gridlock that is in Washington, even though there's a Democratic Congress, a Democratic president. What is the climate in the Atlanta City Council? I know it's been contentious in the past. Now that you're leading it, are you guys able to get business done besides setting aside the diversity of views that are on the council?
Well, I mean, the very nature of government is such that you're supposed to have what is called this tension. You have, the fact that you have different representatives from different parts of a community serving on a council is designed to bring a lot of different ideas, different persuasions, different perspectives to the round to discuss and debate. So it's intended that we will see debate on the council, number one. Number two, the fact that we have branches of government, a judicial branch, a legislative branch, and an executive branch. That's set up also to create what is called this the tension of checks and balances. So we want that kind of tension. The issue becomes, when you have that tension, as you make decisions and you evaluate and deliberate over policy issues, will you do it in a respectful way? Will you do it in a way that really takes into account the basic respect we're supposed to show to individuals? Now, I don't know with respect to, I don't know what you're referring to in terms of the council's last 8 years. I will say, I really do believe that the council has been able to work well together over the last 8 years, and we've come together in tough times and made really tough decisions in unison. And so I'm really proud of that. And I think that's more of what I would call an urban legend than it really is true if you really observe the council. Now, with that being said, going forward, we have a council now in place that is a very strong council. We have folks that are coming with tremendous expertise and background, and we are able to communicate. And as council president, part of our role is making sure that I put council members in places and positions in the council such that chemistry, that natural positive chemistry can be tapped. And so that's part of my role, and I'm working hard on that.
Council President,
yes,
hi, Mayor Dean. Sorry to get a chance to do this. Tara did a great job as usual.
Yes, she did.
But the question of the moment is, what's happening with Freaknik? Will Freaknik come back? And what are you guys going to do about it? Is it such a bad thing? Or are you scared of it? These are young people.
You're asking me if I'm scared of Freaknik.
Wait, was he in Freaknik? Does anyone have pictures?
No. But I'm very familiar with Freaknik. I remember when I was at Morehouse College, Freaknik started as a relatively small picnic over at John A. White. And I remember going to that picnic, and I remember thinking, man, this is kind of boring. This is a typical picnic. And then the next year it grew into a much larger event. I had a lot of fun. And then the following year it grew into something even larger. And it kept growing and growing and growing. I think a part of that growth really came from the fact that the word got out beyond the city of Atlanta. And with technology and this expanding access we have to different types of technology, it creates an environment where you could literally promote a party in 15 minutes now. And so, what does that mean for what happens now? I think, kids are going to come to the city. I think we need to, on the one hand, be prepared for that, have a traffic plan in place to manage that. But I think at all times we need to be respectful of people who are respectful of themselves. And so I welcome anyone who wants to come to Atlanta. Now, there is a process we have here in the city of Atlanta. for doing a festival or a big picnic, a large gathering in a park. If you follow that process, then we welcome you. If you don't follow that process, then you can't be in the park.
Are the city doors open to young people, or are you shutting it down?
Well, I think they're open, but at the same time, we're going to have order, and that's the bottom line. But from my perspective, they should always be open. Part of what makes Atlanta great is not just our civil rights heritage, not our business acumen, but the fact that we really are a town of young people that are educated, young people that are in school, young people that are doing entrepreneurial stuff, whether they went to school or not. And when you look at Atlanta compared to other cities, we really are a big college town on the same level with many other cities around the country. So we've got to embrace it. I think it's our opportunity to do so.
Good evening, Council President Mitchell.
How you doing, Ms. Farmer?
Very well, thanks for asking. I wanted to inquire about the $30 million that was rezone designation that was scheduled to go back to Washington. And I would like you to tell us how much of, or if any of, that money is going back to Washington. And if that money is being spent on streetscaping and transportation projects in those inner city neighborhoods. I happen to benefit from one that happened at my corner, and they told me they used the ACORA money. So I just would like to know if that's what the plan is and what's happening.
Are we ready to go? Is it ready? Okay, Ms. Farmer, your question actually is a very good one.
Thank you.
And I must admit, I must say this. Because there is a humorous side of me. There's a part of me that almost says, or thinks that we should just send the money back. Lesson learned. Because, we've not spent it. And we've had 2 generations of programs to spend it. The empowerment zone and then the renewal community money. But I really can't honestly take that position as a policymaker. Because if we send the money back and don't fight to keep it, that makes it very difficult for us to get money in the future. For example, the federal government sent the state of Georgia several tens of millions of dollars in transportation funding. We haven't spent $80 million of that, and the question is on the table whether or not that money will be asked for by the federal government to be asked back, whether or not they'll require it to be sent back. And if that happens, our ability to get transportation funding in the future will be severely hindered. So by that same token, if we send this money back and don't fight to keep this ACORA money, then our ability to get economic development dollars in the future will be severely hindered. Now, to your question, you really have asked a question about why we haven't spent it and what's really happening with the money that's been spent, or what's the possibility that we'll keep it. It's 3 questions. Number 1, there's a bill in Congress that may allow us to keep the money. We're certainly in conversation with HHS, Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services, to try to keep the money and get them to come up with an agreement that will allow us to keep the money and reprogram that money. Number 2, if you remember, the money really is supposed to be used in a few different buckets. Number 1, economic development projects and infrastructure work, and then social programs. Now, all the social money, the social programs money, has been used up. It was used up, in fine fashion. The money that really hasn't been spent at this point is the bucket that's been designated for economic development projects and things of that nature. Now, a part of the problem is that, this money is not designed and intended to service 100% of the financing costs or financial costs associated with a development project. These monies are really designed to be 10%, 5% kind of gap financing or gap funding. And when you have kind of this external economic situation with the economy that is creating a scenario where no private financing is available, with no private financing available, then it's hard to deploy these funds. And that's part of the problem. That's just a subtle issue that's got us in a place where we have this $30 million that's not been deployed. But I think if we continue to fight and continue to make the strong argument and make the case that we should keep the funds and that we can use the funds, particularly when the economy comes back in play, then we may be able to keep it. I think we may see some good use out of the money.
All right, that wraps it up for our questions. Thank you for hanging in between the tape change.
Yes.
And for showing up.
Oh.
The next time the mayor doesn't show up, we're going to call City Council President Ceasar Mitchell.
Well, I'm sure that the mayor had some pressing issues to attend, and so
Absolutely.
I'm certainly glad to be here to represent the city and have his back.
We want a mayor with a full schedule. Because if the mayor doesn't have anything to do, we might need a new mayor.
That's absolutely right.
Thank you, Ceasar. Let's give Ceasar Mitchell a hand. And thank you at home and here for tuning in to Newsmakers Live. As usual, we will end with a special comment from executive producer Jim Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for all for coming out to the opening of the spring season of Newsmakers Live. We apologize. This is a new facility. We're getting used to it. They're getting used to us. If you didn't get your food fast enough, we're going to fix that next time. If you didn't get your drinks fast enough, we're definitely going to fix that next time. And we'd like to thank you all for coming out. The mayor failed to show tonight, and I believe that is because he is a busy man, because he's dealing with issues in the city that make it impossible for him to predict and control the schedule at all times. I don't believe that there's another reason for that other than that. I'd like to thank the next highest elected official in this city, Ceasar Mitchell, for filling in. It takes a big man. It takes a very big man to play second fiddle to anybody that's his peer. I think we owe him a big round of applause. And we need to acknowledge leaders that really make a difference. And this conversation tonight has not been hyperbole. It has been content value. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Newsmakers.